Hey gardening friends, so I'm in the garden today. It's October 17th and I'm looking at a patch of my bee balm, which is now engulfed with powdery mildew. So you can see the white on the leaves. See if I rub it, you can kind of get rid of it. Powdery mildew is fungal. It's a fungal disease. It is generally plant specific, so if your lilacs have powdery mildew, it's not going to move to your peonies, vice versa. Now, normally the bee balm would be a plant that I would leave up for the winter and then trim it kind of high because the stems can be used by our native bees. They're a little hollow. They are actually hollow if you look at them. So some of our native bees, actually a lot of our native bees, will use plant stems to either overwinter in or to lay their eggs in next spring or this past spring. So if you cut these right down to the ground, you could be removing your native bees. What I've been seeing in the research is to leave stems up to 18 inches from the ground, a foot to 18 inches, because most of the bees will use the bottom portion of the plant. And then you actually leave the stems in the garden next year, and as the plant grows up, it will obscure the dead stalks, and then they'll eventually just break down and add more organic matter to your soil. But with a disease, I think I'm going to have to cut this bed right down to the ground, and then do not compost diseased plant material. You want to get it off your property. Now, powdery mildew will overwinter on the diseased plant material, and if conditions are right next year for it, which it probably will be because this is very common, you will end up with another batch of powdery mildew. So some bee balms are more resistant to powdery mildew than others. You can look for varieties that have been bred or have a natural resistance to powdery mildew. I don't recall seeing this bed quite so bad as it is this year, and I haven't looked at my other beds of powdery mildew. But phlox are also known for being a host to powdery mildew, and this is what it looks like when it's run its course on the plant. And you can still see white on the leaves. The leaves sometimes will dry up and die like this one. And this bed of phlox gets powdery mildew every year because they're in part shade. Actually, they're in shade a lot of the day. So things to avoid with powdery mildew: planting susceptible varieties or cultivars. Look for resistant varieties. Give them good air spacing so the wind can come through and dry foliage. Wet foliage is one of the things that helps the fungus penetrate the plant. There are fungicides that you can use, but I tried not to use a lot of chemicals in the garden now. Even some fungicides have been shown to have adverse effects on bees and other pollinators. So good airflow, resistant cultivars, planting in the plant in the right place. Phlox, of course, would prefer full sun. You could thin if your stand of phlox or bee balm gets rather large. You can thin the plants out and let some more airflow go in there. But your best course of action is a good cleanup in the fall and then monitor the plants during the growing season. Most fungicides are preventative, meaning you have to apply them before the plant gets the disease. I would have to actually look and see if there's anything that's considered curative now for powdery mildew. There are some, newer organic products out there that might have some curative properties. But again, the best thing to do is to identify your disease, identify the plant that is on, and then look for a product that has both of those things on the label. And then follow the label directions carefully. You don't want to use more than the label says. You don't want to use less. You should definitely follow the label directions. All right, so we will be cleaning up this bed of bee balm, and we will be getting it off the property. Again, this is powdery mildew on bee balm.